On August 14, 2023, at exactly 4:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I woke up from a 21-day coma in room 5012 of Presbyterian Hospital's Neurological Intensive Care Unit to find my daughter-in-law, Melissa and Crawford, standing over my supposedly brain-dead body with an interior designer named Philippe Beaumont, discussing whether to paint my bedroom walls Moroccan sand or Sahara sunset, while holding fabric swatches against my face to see which complemented my dying complexion better. "He's never waking up anyway," she said, her voice carrying the particular tone of barely concealed glee that comes from unexpected inheritance. "The doctors said massive brain damage, irreversible. Dr. Peterson gave him maybe another week before organ failure. We might as well make the house beautiful for when we move in. I'm thinking we got the master suite completely. That dated wood paneling has got to go." What Melissa didn't know, what nobody except my nurse Maria Gonzalez knew, was that I'd been conscious but unable to move or speak for the past 4 days, trapped in what doctors call locked-in syndrome, listening to every conversation, every scheme, every casual discussion of my death, every celebration of my anticipated demise, while she systematically spent $150,847.33 of my money redecorating the 8,000-square-foot house she assumed she'd inherit along with the rest of my $96,438,221.67. Fortune that I'd built over 48 years in the construction industry. My name is Joseph William Crawford. I'm 71 years old, founder and former CEO of Crawford Construction Corporation. And this is the story of how I turned 3 weeks in a coma into 3 years in federal prison for my daughter-in-law, recovered every penny she stole plus triple damages, destroyed her marriage to my son, exposed her affair with her personal trainer, and made absolutely certain she'd spend the rest of her miserable life remembering that some people wake up at exactly the right moment to destroy those who celebrated too early. Let me paint you the complete, unvarnished picture of the empire I built with these hands before a stroke tried to take it and a daughter-in-law tried to steal it. I started Crawford Construction in 1975 with a used 1969 Ford F-100 pickup truck that burned oil like a crematorium, a toolbox I'd inherited from my father who died of a heart attack on a job site in 1973, and $843.27 I'd saved working nights at Jones and Laughlin Steel Mill in Pittsburgh, where the air was so thick with particulates that you could chew it, and the temperature in summer reached 140 degrees near the furnaces. I was 24 years old, married for 2 years to my high school sweetheart Eleanor Marie Kowalski, living in a 2-room apartment above the Golden Dragon Chinese restaurant on Carson Street that made the whole building smell like soy sauce and broken dreams, where the cockroaches were so bold they'd introduce themselves. The first job I got was replacing Mrs. Chen's roof after her husband saw me fixing our landlord's gutters and said I looked like I knew what I was doing, which was a lie, but I needed the $500 desperately. The job took me 3 days because I did everything myself, including falling off the ladder twice, once into her rose bushes and once onto her concrete driveway, which is how I got the scar on my left shoulder that looks like a question mark. But I finished the job, the roof didn't leak, and Mrs. Chen told her entire church about the nice young man who worked so hard. That church had 43 members who all seemed to need home repairs. By the end of 1975, I'd done 17 roofs, 12 bathroom renovations, and 1 complete kitchen remodel that nearly killed me when I discovered the previous contractor had been using newspaper for insulation and prayers for load-bearing support. But I was good with my hands. My father had taught me carpentry from age 7. And better with people. I showed up when I said I would, charged what I quoted even when I underestimated and lost money, and fixed what I broke without charging extra. In construction in 1970s Pittsburgh, that made me practically a unicorn, a mythical creature that actually gave a damn. Eleanor was my partner in everything except the manual labor. She kept the books, answered the phone, scheduled appointments, and somehow made our $400 monthly income stretch to cover $500 in expenses through what she called creative accounting and what I called miracles. She'd make dinner from whatever was on sale, hot dogs and sauerkraut on Mondays, spaghetti with butter on Tuesdays, eggs and toast for the rest of the week. We'd eat by candlelight, not for romance but because the electricity got shut off twice, and pretend we were in a fancy restaurant instead of above a Chinese takeout place where the owner's arguments with his wife provided our dinner entertainment. By 1980, I had 4 employees: Tommy Kowalski, Eleanor's cousin; Big Mike Thompson, who was actually quite small; Jerry the Tool Torelli, because he always had the right tool for any job; and Stan Wojcik, who could tile a bathroom blindfolded and often seemed to. We operated out of a rented warehouse in Hazleton that leaked when it rained and froze in winter, but it was ours, or at least ours to rent. I was building custom homes for Pittsburgh's new money: doctors, lawyers, steel executives who'd survived the layoffs and wanted to display their survival with imported marble and gold-plated fixtures. The real breakthrough came in 1983 when I bid on a development project in Fox Chapel, 37 luxury homes for executives fleeing the city. Every other contractor said it would take 3 years. I promised 18 months and delivered in 17, using crews that worked in shifts, prefabricated components I designed myself, and a scheduling system Eleanor created that looked like a war plan and worked like a Swiss watch. That project netted us $1.2 million in profit and a reputation as the company that delivered on time, on budget, and beyond expectations. By 1985, Crawford Construction was building not just homes but entire neighborhoods. We had 68 employees, annual revenues of $15 million, and a waiting list of clients who wanted the Crawford Guarantee, which I'd had printed on actual certificates because rich people love certificates. By 1990, we were the largest residential construction company in western Pennsylvania, with 230 employees, annual revenues of $50 million, and projects ranging from starter homes in Monroeville to estates in Sewickley that had their own zip codes. But the real money, the fuck you money, as Eleanor called it when she'd had wine, came when I started buying land in the early 1990s. The steel industry was dying, farms were failing, and land that had been in families for generations was suddenly for sale. I'd buy 100 acres of farmland for $1,000 an acre from farmers who thought they were robbing me, hold it for 5 years while suburban sprawl crept closer like a well-dressed invasion, then sell it to developers for $50,000 an acre. It was like printing money, except legal and requiring more patience than a saint and more capital than a small country. By 2000, I owned 3,000 acres across Allegheny, Westmoreland, and Butler counties. When Marcellus shale drilling came to Pennsylvania, I owned the mineral rights to land that was suddenly worth more than gold. Literally, gold was $300 an ounce, and my mineral rights were valued at $500 per acre per month in royalties. By 2010, between the construction company, the real estate holdings, and the mineral rights, I was worth $180 million on paper, though paper doesn't buy groceries unless you sell it. When I sold Crawford Construction in 2015 to Berkshire Property Development, a national conglomerate that had all the personality of a spreadsheet, I kept my personal real estate portfolio and walked away with $240 million in cash and securities. After taxes mugged me in a dark alley and took 37%, charitable donations to causes Eleanor cared about, and employee bonuses, every single person who'd been with us more than 5 years got $50,000. Those with 10 years got $100,000, and Tommy Kowalski, who'd been there since the beginning, got $500,000 and cried like a baby. I was left with $96 million and change. Eleanor and I had one son, Daniel Joseph Crawford, born March 15, 1978, after 5 years of trying, 2 miscarriages that nearly broke Eleanor's spirit, and 1 ectopic pregnancy that nearly killed her. He was our miracle baby, which might explain why we spoiled him rotten like milk left in the sun. Private schools from kindergarten at Shadyside Academy, Yale University where he majored in economics and minored in spending my money, Harvard MBA where he learned to use words like synergy and leverage without laughing, and a trust fund that paid out $100,000 a year just in interest because I thought love could be measured in dollars. We gave him everything except struggle, which as it turns out, is like giving someone a car without teaching them to drive. Dangerous for everyone involved. He never worked construction, never swung a hammer except in anger, never learned that money comes from sweat and sometimes blood. Eleanor worried about it, said we were raising a prince in a world that needed workers, but I was too proud of my success to listen. He'll never have to suffer like we did, I'd say. That's the point of success. Eleanor would respond, "Suffering teaches compassion. What's success teaching him?" I should have listened. Eleanor was always right about people, even when I wished she wasn't. I met Melissa and Hartley at Daniel's wedding on June 18, 2009, at the Duquesne Club in Pittsburgh, a wedding that cost $347,000 and lasted 6 hours, which works out to $57,833 per hour or $963 per minute of happiness, though happiness might be too strong a word. She was beautiful in that calculated way that requires a team of professionals and a budget that could feed a small nation. Blonde hair that cost $400 to maintain monthly at a salon in Shadyside, teeth veneered so white they could be seen from space, a body sculpted by personal trainers and sustained by lettuce, cocaine, and spite, though I didn't know about the cocaine until later. She was 26, from a middle-class family in Ohio who'd spent their retirement savings sending her to Penn State where she'd majored in communications, which is what people major in when they're communicating their intention to marry rich. Daniel was 31, working at my company in a made-up position called Director of Strategic Development, which meant he attended meetings, nodded thoughtfully, and collected $150,000 a year for sharing my last name. I was suspicious of Melissa from the moment she called me Daddy Joe with a smile that never reached her eyes, which remained as calculating as a Texas Instruments calculator. Eleanor was more direct in her assessment. After the wedding, still in her mother-of-the-bride dress that cost more than our first car, she pulled me aside and said, "That woman looks at our money the way a wolf looks at sheep, with hunger and patience. Mark my words, Joseph, she'll be the death of this family." I thought it was the champagne talking, or jealousy that another woman was taking her baby boy. I should have known Eleanor was right even when tipsy. She had better judgment drunk than most people had sober. The first few years of their marriage seemed successful, if you define success as spending money and posting about it on Instagram. They bought a house in Shadyside for $1.8 million that I co-signed for, drove matching Mercedes SUVs that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and took vacations to places I couldn't pronounce to do things that seemed to involve a lot of sitting and being served. Melissa decorated their house with the enthusiasm of someone spending someone else's money, which she was. Every time I visited, something was different. New furniture, new art, new appliances that could connect to the internet for reasons that escaped me. Eleanor tried to bond with Melissa, inviting her to lunch, teaching her family recipes, including her in traditions that went back generations. Melissa would show up late, leave early, and spend the entire time on her phone texting someone named Brad who she said was her Pilates instructor, but who seemed to require an awful lot of communication for someone who taught stretching. Eleanor's final assessment, delivered 2 months before her diagnosis, was succinct: she's fucking someone else, stealing from Daniel, and planning something bigger. I can smell it on her like cheap perfume. Eleanor's ovarian cancer diagnosis came on January 15, 2016, a date that divides my life into before and after like the Berlin Wall of personal tragedy. She'd been tired, bloated, uncomfortable for months, but we attributed it to stress from my retirement, the adjustment to not working 16-hour days. Dr. Patricia Hoffman at UPMC delivered the news with professional gentleness that somehow made it worse. Stage IIC ovarian cancer, already in the lymph nodes, possibly in the liver. Surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, the whole arsenal of medical warfare against cells that had forgotten how to die properly. Eleanor fought for 9 months with the grace of a dancer and the determination of a steelworker. She had surgery that removed parts of her I'd never thought about losing. She had chemotherapy that made her hair fall out in clumps that she'd collect and joke about donating to birds for nesting material. She had radiation that burned her from the inside out but never touched her spirit. Through it all, Daniel visited twice a month, always looking at his watch, always with Melissa who'd sit in the corner texting Brad or shopping online, occasionally looking up to ask how much longer we'd be at the hospital. Eleanor's last words to me, on September 23, 2016, at 3:47 a.m. in our bedroom where I'd set up a hospital bed so she could die at home, were prophetic: "Joseph, watch that woman. She's not done taking. She won't be satisfied with Daniel's money, she wants yours. And Joseph? Don't let her redecorate the house. I picked everything for a reason." Promise me." I promised, holding her hand that had grown thin as paper but was still strong enough to squeeze back. She died at 4:13 a.m., as the sun was starting to lighten the sky, which seemed appropriate for someone who'd been the light in my life for 41 years. Daniel arrived at 10 a.m., 6 hours after his mother died, because Melissa had a spa appointment she couldn't reschedule. That should have been my first real warning, but grief makes you stupid and generous with forgiveness you shouldn't give. After Eleanor's death, I threw myself into managing my investments and properties like a man possessed, which I was, possessed by the need to not think about the Eleanor-shaped hole in my life. I owned 43 rental properties across 3 counties, a portfolio worth $60 million. I had stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and enough cryptocurrency to make me accidentally trendy, though I didn't understand how imaginary internet money could be worth actual dollars. I lived alone in our 8,000-square-foot house in Sewickley Heights, the one Eleanor had designed with rooms for grandchildren who never came because Melissa didn't want to ruin her body with pregnancy, though she'd ruined it plenty with cosmetic surgery that made her look like a balloon animal. The relationship with Daniel deteriorated after Eleanor died, like milk left out in summer. He'd call once a month, usually when he needed money. He'd visit on holidays, always with Melissa hovering like a well-dressed vulture, circling my conversations, interrupting to steer things toward finances. She'd walk through the house making comments, "This wallpaper is so dated, probably from the 80s. It was from 1994, and Eleanor had chosen it. These carpets must be original to the house." They were, and they were Persian, worth more than her car. "Have you thought about updating the kitchen? I know a great designer." Philippe Beaumont, who'd later try to help her steal everything. The stroke happened on July 24, 2023, at 7:43 a.m., a Monday that started like any other Monday in my retirement, badly. I was making breakfast, the kind that would make a cardiologist weep, 3 eggs scrambled with cream and butter, 4 strips of bacon that weren't turkey, toast with real butter, not that margarine nonsense, orange juice with pulp because pulp-free is for cowards, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead, which it would need to be in about 30 seconds. I felt the headache first, like someone driving a railroad spike through my right temporal lobe with a sledgehammer operated by someone who really meant it. Then the left side of my face went numb, like I'd been to a dentist who'd missed the tooth and hit everything else. My left arm stopped responding to commands, hanging at my side like it had quit without giving notice. I managed to dial 911 with my right hand before I collapsed, the phone recording my groaning attempts to speak as my brain misfired like an engine running on water instead of gasoline, or like a computer trying to boot with half its hard drive missing. The EMTs found me 12 minutes later, unconscious on my kitchen floor, my breakfast burning on the stove, filling the house with smoke that would later require professional cleaning to remove. The stroke was massive, a hemorrhagic event in my right hemisphere that should have killed me instantly but didn't because apparently I'm too stubborn to die on schedule. Blood was pooling in my brain, pressing on areas that controlled movement, speech, and the ability to tell Melissa to go fuck herself, which would prove temporarily problematic. I was rushed to Presbyterian Hospital, the same place Eleanor had her surgeries, where Dr. Patricia Chun, one of the best neurosurgeons in Pennsylvania and someone who'd once bought a house for my company, spent 6 hours inside my skull trying to save what was left of my brain. She removed a blood clot the size of a golf ball, repaired 3 ruptured vessels, and installed a drain that made me look like I was being refueled. She later told me that my survival was miraculous, though Melissa would use different words like unfortunate and financially inconvenient. I survived the surgery but didn't wake up, falling into what doctors call a persistent vegetative state, which sounds like something you'd find in your refrigerator's crisper drawer that you forgot about 3 months ago. My body was alive, heart beating, lungs breathing with mechanical assistance, kidneys doing whatever kidneys do, but my brain was supposedly gone, the lights on but nobody home, the car running but no driver, Elvis having left the building permanently. The doctors told Daniel and Melissa that I might never wake up, and if I did, I'd likely be severely impaired, unable to speak except in grunts, walk except in shuffles, or remember my own name except on Tuesdays. They painted a picture of a future where I'd need round-the-clock care, feeding tubes, adult diapers, and someone to remind me that the person in the mirror was me. Melissa's eyes lit up like Christmas morning at Tiffany's when she heard the words persistent vegetative state. Daniel was devastated, or at least performed devastation convincingly. I know because I heard him crying at my bedside on day 3 of my coma, though I couldn't open my eyes or squeeze his hand to let him know I was still in there, trapped like a person buried alive in their own body. "Dad, please come back," he sobbed, his tears falling on my hand where I could feel but not respond to them. "I need you. I'm sorry for everything, for not visiting more, for letting Melissa treat you badly, for not being the son you deserved. Please, just wake up." It was the most honest he'd been with me since he was 12 and broke Eleanor's favorite vase, then confessed because the guilt was eating him alive. But even his genuine emotion was tainted by Melissa's presence. She stood in the corner, texting on her phone, occasionally making comforting noises that sounded like a cat being strangled. "Daniel, baby, we need to be realistic. The doctors said he's basically brain dead. We need to think about our future. Our future. Not his future. Our future with my money." On day 5, Melissa was already planning my funeral and her inheritance. I heard her on the phone with someone named Brad, her personal trainer who was apparently personal in ways that didn't involve exercise unless you counted horizontal cardio. "The doctors say he's brain dead, massive damage to the speech and motor centers. It's just a matter of time now. Daniel's already talking about pulling the plug if he doesn't improve in a week. Then everything's ours, the house, the money, all of it. 96 million, Brad. We can finally be together properly." Brad, it turned out, was more than her personal trainer. He was her boyfriend, her actual relationship, while Daniel was just her meal ticket. She'd been having an affair for 2 years, meeting him at a gym in Shadyside, paying for his apartment with money she stole from Daniel's accounts, planning a future that required my death and Daniel's ignorance. The fact that she was discussing this in my hospital room, 3 feet from my supposedly unhearing ears, showed either incredible stupidity or incredible confidence. Probably both. On day 7, she brought an estate lawyer to my hospital room, a man named Richard Steinberg who specialized in end-of-life asset management, which is a fancy way of saying grave robbing with paperwork. I could hear them discussing my assets while I lay there, unable to move but fully aware, like being buried alive in your own body while people divide your possessions. "The will leaves everything to Daniel," Steinberg said, his voice oily as used motor oil. "Roughly $96 million in total assets, $60 million in real estate, $30 million in securities, $6 million in liquid accounts." Melissa actually giggled, a sound like champagne bubbles if champagne was poison. "We'll need to redecorate that awful house immediately. It looks like a museum to the 1990s. I've already contacted Philippe. He has wonderful ideas." "Isn't that premature?" Steinberg asked with what might have been conscience, but was probably just caution. "The doctors say he's got maybe 2 weeks before complete organ failure. We're just being proactive. Daniel's already given me power of attorney." That was a lie. Daniel had done no such thing. She'd forged the documents, and poorly as it would turn out, signing his name with her distinctive loops and flourishes that a first-year forensic student could identify as fake. She'd also given herself access to my accounts using these forged documents, transferring money she thought I'd never miss from a man she thought would never wake. By day 10, I'd regained some consciousness but still couldn't move or speak. It was like being locked in a safe at the bottom of the ocean, dark pressure from all sides, and no one could hear me scream. The doctors called it locked-in syndrome, though Melissa called it convenient and perfect timing. She and Daniel would visit daily, Daniel holding my hand and talking about recovery, reading me sports scores and news like I cared about the Pirates' losing streak. Melissa would check her phone, text Brad, and occasionally look up to suggest that Daniel should prepare for the inevitable and think about practical matters. On day 12, something extraordinary happened. During a routine check, my nurse Maria Gonzalez noticed my right index finger moving. Not randomly, but with purpose. Tap, tap, tap. She leaned closer and whispered, "Mr. Crawford, if you can hear me, tap once." I tapped once. "If you're fully aware, tap twice." I tapped twice. Her eyes went wide as dinner plates. Maria was my guardian angel in Scrubs, a 55-year-old woman from the Philippines who'd been a nurse for 30 years and had seen enough family vultures to recognize another one. She'd watched Melissa come in with interior designers, contractors, real estate agents, all while I was supposedly dying. She'd heard the conversations about my money, my house, my death. And now she knew I was aware of all of it. "Mr. Crawford," she whispered, checking that Melissa had left, "do you want me to help you?" One tap. "Do you want me to keep this secret for now?" One tap. "Do you want to catch them?" Two taps, enthusiastic as I could make them. Maria became my co-conspirator. She helped me set up a recording system using my phone, which was on the bedside table. She'd position it to record whenever Melissa visited, uploading everything to the cloud that I'd set up years ago but Melissa didn't know existed. She'd also leave legal pads where I could tap out messages using a code we developed. One tap for A, two for B, and so on. It was exhausting, but rage is excellent fuel. On day 14, Melissa brought Philippe Beaumont, an interior designer who spoke with a French accent so fake it came with its own beret and baguette. They stood at the foot of my bed discussing renovation plans while I lay there, supposedly comatose, actually recording everything on my phone that Maria had strategically positioned. "The living room needs complete gutting," Philippe said. "That wood paneling is a crime against aesthetics. Very 1990s. Very dead." "Eleanor picked that paneling," Daniel said quietly from his chair. "Well, Eleanor's dead," Melissa snapped with the sensitivity of a brick through a window. "And soon Joseph will be too. We need to think about our future, not their past." "The renovation will be expensive," Philippe warned, though his tone suggested he was hoping for expensive. "I've already transferred $150,000 from his accounts," Melissa said casually, like she was discussing grocery money. "He's never waking up anyway. The doctors said massive brain damage. We might as well make the house beautiful for when we move in." "Isn't that illegal?" Philippe asked with his fake French concern that sounded more like fake Portuguese. "Only if someone finds out," Melissa laughed. "And the only person who could complain is brain dead. Daniel gave me power of attorney. I can do whatever I want." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't actually." "Daniel, baby, we discussed this. It's just paperwork. Your father would want us to be comfortable." "My father would want me to throw you off a bridge," I thought but couldn't say. On day 18, while Melissa was showing Philippe photos on her phone of furniture she'd already ordered using my credit cards, $50,000 for Italian leather sofas, $30,000 for a dining table made from a single tree that probably had a name and a biography, $15,000 for smart toilets that could analyze your waste and judge your diet. I heard her say the words that would ultimately destroy her. "Brad and I are planning to leave for Europe once everything settles. A year, maybe two, traveling while Daniel grieves. He'll never know about us. By the time we come back, I'll be a wealthy widow. Well, not technically a widow since I'll divorce Daniel first, but wealthy definitely." Philippe gasped with genuine shock this time. "You're planning to divorce him?" "Once I have access to the full inheritance. Joseph's will leaves everything to Daniel, but Pennsylvania is a marital property state. I'll get half of everything in the divorce. $48 million for 6 years of marriage to a man with the personality of wallpaper paste. Not a bad return on investment." I wanted to scream, to rise from the bed like Lazarus and strangle her with my 4 tubes. But I could only lie there, recording, planning, waiting. On day 21, August 14, 2023, at exactly 4 a.m., I felt something change in my brain, like a switch flipping or a door opening. My eyes, which had been able to open but not focus, suddenly cleared. My voice, which had been locked in my throat, suddenly loosened. My left arm, which had been dead weight, suddenly tingled with possibility. I was waking up, fully this time, like a computer finally finishing a very long reboot. At 4:17 a.m., Melissa arrived with Tony Ricci, a contractor who'd done work for me before and should have known better, and Mike Patterson, an electrician who definitely should have known better. They were discussing removing walls in my house, installing a pool that would destroy Eleanor's rose garden, converting her art studio into a gym for Brad who apparently needed 2,000 square feet to do push-ups. How long will the renovation take? Melissa asked, her voice carrying the particular tone of someone spending money they hadn't earned. 3 months if we work fast, Tony replied. But are you sure the old man won't wake up? I've known Joe Crawford for 20 years. He's tougher than a $2 steak. The doctors say he's got maybe a week before complete organ failure. His brain is basically mush. We're just being proactive. That's when I opened my eyes fully for the first time in 3 weeks. Not gradually, not fluttering like a butterfly, but wide open like window shades snapping up on a spring morning. Melissa was facing away, pointing at something on a blueprint that looked like it was turning my house into a Vegas nightclub. Tony saw me first and went white as my hospital sheets. Mrs. Crawford, he said, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old's. What? She snapped, turning around with the blueprint. When she saw my eyes open, staring directly at her with the kind of focus that could burn holes through steel, she dropped everything. The blueprint fluttered to the floor like her plans falling apart. Her phone shattered on the linoleum like her future. Good morning, Melissa, I said, my voice hoarse but clear as a bell in a cathedral. Moroccan sand or Sahara sunset? She stammered, her Botoxed face trying to express surprise, but mostly just looking constipated. Joseph, how long have you? 4 days fully conscious. 3 weeks partially aware. Every conversation recorded. Every theft documented. Every plan captured. Every word about Brad, about the divorce, about my mush brain, saved to 3 different cloud servers. Maria, could you please call my lawyer? And the police. And Daniel. In that order. Maria, bless her Filipino heart, was already dialing, a smile on her face that could have powered Pittsburgh for a week. The next 6 hours were beautiful chaos, like a symphony where every instrument was playing a different song, but somehow it all worked. My lawyer, William Sterling, arrived with 3 associates and a forensic accountant who looked like she ate embezzlers for breakfast. The police arrived with Detective Patricia Morrison, who specialized in elder abuse and financial crimes and had the demeanor of someone who'd seen enough family betrayals to write a very depressing book. Daniel arrived last, confused and panicked, still in his pajamas because Melissa had left without telling him where she was going at 4 a.m., which even he found suspicious. His hair was standing up like he'd been electrocuted, and he had the wild eyes of someone who just realized their life was about to change dramatically. We gathered in a conference room that the hospital administrator, Mr. Harrison, hastily made available, probably hoping to avoid a lawsuit or hoping for gossip, possibly both. I was in a wheelchair that Maria pushed, still weak but mentally sharp as the surgical instruments that had saved my life. The evidence was presented methodically, like a prosecutor building a case, which is essentially what we were doing. First, the forged power of attorney documents. William had the originals, which showed Daniel's real signature, small, cramped, like he was afraid of taking up space. Melissa's forgery looked like someone trying to copy the Mona Lisa with a crayon while drunk on a roller coaster. She'd even spelled Daniel's middle name wrong, Joseph instead of James. Second, the bank statements. $150,847.33 transferred from my accounts to hers over 3 weeks, documented with the kind of detail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. Every transaction traced, every penny tracked, every transfer illegal as a $3 bill. She'd been smart enough to keep each transfer under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements, but stupid enough to make 17 transfers in 3 weeks, which created a pattern visible from space. Third, the receipts. Oh, the glorious receipts. $50,000 for Italian marble countertops from Carrara that Eleanor would have hated. $30,000 for a kitchen island made from a single piece of Brazilian granite that had supposedly been blessed by monks, though what monks were doing blessing granite was unclear. $15,000 for smart toilets from Japan that could do everything except forgive sins and apparently needed their own IP address. $20,000 for wallpaper that cost more per square foot than most people's rent, hand-painted by artists in France who probably laughed all the way to the bank. $10,000 for light fixtures that looked like modern art having a nervous breakdown. $8,000 for doorknobs that were supposedly designed by some famous architect who'd clearly run out of real things to design. Fourth, the recordings. Hours of Melissa planning my death, celebrating my coma, spending my money, discussing her affair with Brad the personal trainer who apparently needed personal training in discretion. The recording of her saying she divorced Daniel after getting my inheritance was particularly damning. The one where she called my brain mush, while I was lying there listening, was personally insulting. Daniel sat through the presentation in stunned silence, aging 10 years in 10 minutes like a time-lapse video of decay. When the recording of Melissa calling him wallpaper paste played, he put his head in his hands and sobbed, real tears this time, not the performative kind he'd cried at my bedside. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, his voice muffled by his hands. "I'm so fucking sorry." "Language," I said automatically, a reflex from his childhood, then smiled. "But I'll allow it this once." "Actually, fuck it, say whatever you want. Your wife's a criminal." Detective Morrison took Melissa into custody right there in the hospital conference room. The charges were extensive enough to need their own index: elder abuse, fraud, forgery, theft, conspiracy to commit murder, the recordings of her discussing pulling the plug qualified, identity theft, and something called exploitation of a vulnerable adult, which sounded redundant but apparently carried extra jail time. "You can't do this," she screamed as they cuffed her, her voice hitting octaves that probably disturbed dolphins. "Daniel, tell them. Tell them I had permission." Daniel looked at her with eyes that had finally seen the truth, like someone had turned on the lights in a room he'd been sitting in for years. "I'm filing for divorce. Today. This morning. Right now. Maria, can I borrow your phone?" "You'll get nothing. I'll take everything. I'll destroy you." "You already did," Daniel said quietly. "And now you'll pay for it." As they led her away, she turned to me with pure hatred in her professionally sculpted eyes that had cost $15,000 to lift and would see prison bars for the next several years. "You were supposed to die. Disappointing you is apparently my superpower," I replied. "Like waking up at convenient times." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of recovery and revenge, which sounds like a terrible TV show but was actually quite satisfying. Physical therapy to regain my strength, which involved a sadistic woman named Olga who seemed to believe pain was just weakness leaving the body, preferably screaming. Occupational therapy to regain my function, which mostly involved proving I could still sign checks and legal documents. Speech therapy to ensure I could testify clearly, though my speech was fine. I just wanted to make sure I could pronounce guilty clearly when the time came. The criminal trial was swift because the evidence was overwhelming and the jury unsympathetic to a woman who'd spent $150,000 redecorating a house while the owner was in a coma. The prosecutor, a young woman named Sarah Kim who reminded me of Eleanor in her intensity and her ability to destroy someone with words, painted Melissa as a vulture in Versace, circling what she thought was a corpse, picking at the bones of a man she'd assumed was already dead. Melissa's defense was pathetic. She claimed she had Daniel's permission, which fell apart when Daniel testified against her wearing a suit I'd never seen him in and an expression of righteous fury I'd never seen him wear. She claimed the money was gifts from me over the years, which the forensic accounting disproved with a kind of detailed analysis that made the jury's eyes glaze over but convinced them nonetheless. She even claimed I'd promised her the house, which was hard to prove since I'd been unconscious when she said I said it, and I had recordings of her saying I was brain dead at the time. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 17 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a woman named Patricia Hayes who'd clearly seen enough of these cases to be thoroughly disgusted, sentenced Melissa to 12 years in federal prison, no parole before 8. Full restitution of the $150,847.33, plus damages of $1 million for emotional distress, though no amount of money could undo the image of her discussing paint colors over my supposedly dying body. She also ordered the forfeiture of everything Melissa had bought with my money, from the smart toilets that were smarter than her to the marble countertops that would outlast her freedom. I had everything she bought ripped out of my house and donated to Habitat for Humanity, because even stolen marble can house the homeless, and smart toilets are still toilets. The doorknobs went to a women's shelter, where they'd open doors to better futures than Melissa would have. Brad, the personal trainer, disappeared the moment Melissa was arrested, like a muscle-bound ghost. Turned out he was married with 3 kids and wanted nothing to do with a federal investigation or a woman who'd soon be wearing orange instead of Lululemon. He moved to Florida, where he probably tells other married women they have great potential while planning his next escape. Philippe Beaumont, the fake French designer, was actually from Newark, New Jersey, and his real name was Phil Baumgartner. He was charged as an accomplice and got 2 years, served 1, and now works at a Home Depot in Jersey City, which seems like poetic justice for someone who charged $500 an hour for aesthetic consultations and thought wood paneling was a crime. The divorce was even faster than the criminal trial. Daniel, finally free from Melissa's influence and apparently possessed of a spine he'd been hiding for years, was ruthless. She got nothing, no alimony, no assets, no sympathy, no furniture, not even the smart toilets she'd loved so much. Their prenup, which she'd insisted on to protect her future wealth that existed only in her imagination, worked against her like a boomerang made of legal documents. She left the marriage with the clothes on her back, which were confiscated as evidence, and a prison uniform in her future, which orange was definitely not her color. Daniel and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully, like constructing a house on ground that had been shaken by earthquakes and possibly salted by Romans. He moved back home temporarily, sleeping in his childhood bedroom that still had posters of baseball players who'd retired before he graduated high school. He helped with my recovery, learning to cook for the first time in his life, though his scrambled eggs were more like egg-flavored rubber and his coffee could strip paint. We talked about his mother, really talked, not the surface conversation we'd had for years. About her laugh that sounded like wind chimes. About her ability to see through people like they were made of glass. About how she'd known Melissa was poison but loved Daniel too much to force him to see it. I knew she was wrong for me, he admitted one evening over beer and pizza that had too much cheese and not enough regret. But she was so beautiful, so confident. She made me feel important. "You are important," I said. "Just not for your inheritance." "How did you and Mom make it work for so long?" "We liked each other," I said simply. "Before we loved each other, we liked each other. We were friends who happened to be married. Melissa never liked you, Daniel. She liked the idea of you, the bank account of you, the future inheritance of you. But not you. You were just a vehicle to get to me, and I was just an obstacle to get through." He nodded, understanding finally what Eleanor had tried to tell him years ago when she'd said, "Marry someone who'd love you if you were poor, because someday you might be." I recovered fully from the stroke, surprising my doctors and disappointing Melissa's prison pen pals who'd hoped to comfort a wealthy widow. My brain, despite the hemorrhage and Melissa's assessment of it being mush, works fine. I walk with a slight limp that I emphasize when I want sympathy and hide when I play golf, where I still shoot in the 80s, which is better than my age. My speech is perfect, though I sometimes pretend to struggle when telemarketers call, dragging out words until they hang up in frustration. The house renovation that Melissa started was reversed completely. Every piece of marble removed and donated. Every smart toilet returned to regular toilet status. Every trace of her erased like she'd never existed except in court documents and credit card statements. I restored it to exactly how Eleanor had decorated it, down to the wood paneling Philippe had called a crime but which Eleanor had called warm and authentic, like real life should be. I changed my will, naturally and necessarily. Daniel still inherits, but through a trust that requires him to earn it. Work for 5 years in actual construction, not managing but building, getting his hands dirty and his back sore. He's 3 years in now, working for Crawford Construction's new owners, starting as a laborer and working his way up to foreman. His hands have calluses for the first time in his life, thick as leather and earned through honest work. He can operate every piece of equipment, read blueprints, and curse creatively when things go wrong. He's never been happier. Maria, my guardian angel nurse who'd recognized my consciousness when everyone else thought I was vegetable matter, retired last year. I set up a fund for her, $500,000 to thank her for saving not just my life but my fortune and my faith in humanity. She cried when I gave her the check, then used it to bring her entire family from the Philippines to America. 17 people who send me food every holiday that's better than anything I can cook. The $96 million is still mine, growing at about 7% annually in conservative investments because at my age, risk is something you avoid like Melissa avoids honest work. I've set up a foundation in Eleanor's name that provides scholarships for nursing students, because nurses like Maria are worth more than interior designers like Philippe and personal trainers like Brad combined. I've donated $10 million to stroke research, because surviving one makes you appreciate the brain you have left, even if others call it mush. I still live in the house in Sewickley Heights, alone but not lonely, surrounded by Eleanor's choices and memories that don't need updating. Daniel visits every Sunday for dinner, which we cook together badly but with enthusiasm. He's dating a teacher named Jennifer, a real teacher who teaches real children real subjects, not someone pretending to teach yoga while hunting for rich husbands. She's kind, funny, intelligent, and called my wood paneling authentic and charming, which immediately made her family. She also said the smart toilets sounded creepy and unnecessary, which made her perfect. Melissa is in federal prison in West Virginia, where she apparently runs a scheme teaching other inmates how to apply makeup with commissary items, turning toothpaste and Kool-Aid into cosmetics. She writes to Daniel occasionally, letters full of apologies that sound like they were written by a lawyer and requests for money that sound like they were written by her. He burns them unread in the fireplace, using them to start fires that actually warm the house, which is the most useful she's ever been. Last month was the 2-year anniversary of waking up from the coma. Daniel and I celebrated with dinner at Eleanor's favorite restaurant, a little Italian place that hasn't updated its decor since 1987 and doesn't need to. We toasted with beer, not champagne, and talked about the future, not the past. He told me Jennifer is pregnant, that I'm going to be a grandfather, that they want to name the baby Eleanor if it's a girl, Joseph if it's a boy. I cried then, right there in the restaurant with the outdated decor and perfect meatballs, thinking about Eleanor and grandchildren and rooms in our house that would finally be filled with laughter instead of schemes. The nursery would not be painted Moroccan sand or Sahara sunset, but something Eleanor would have chosen, probably a soft green like spring leaves, with wood furniture that didn't need to be smart. The $150,847.33 that Melissa spent in 3 weeks while I was comatose breaks down to $50,282.44 per week, $7,183.20 per day, $299.30 per hour, $4.99 per minute. She literally spent $5 of my money every single minute I was unconscious, which might be some kind of record for daughter-in-law greed. The smart toilets alone cost $833.33 per day of my coma, which means she valued Japanese toilet technology more than my life. But here's the beautiful thing. I'm still here, still breathing, still able to tell this story. Every morning I wake up in the bed Melissa wanted to replace with something Italian and expensive, look at the walls she wanted to paint colors that sound like desserts, and smile. I make breakfast, the same artery-clogging meal that almost killed me, because if you survive a stroke and a murderous daughter-in-law, you've earned the right to eat bacon. The interior designer receipts are framed in my office now, a monument to greed and bad taste. Sometimes I look at them and laugh, thinking about Melissa in prison, wearing orange instead of designer labels, using a regular toilet instead of a smart one, surrounded by concrete instead of Italian marble. Every day she spends in prison is a day I spend free, Every meal she eats in the cafeteria is a meal I eat in my authentic wood-panel dining room. My name is Joseph Crawford. I'm 73 years old. I built a construction empire with my bare hands, lost a wife to cancer who saw this coming, survived a stroke that should have killed me, and woke up from a coma just in time to catch my daughter-in-law spending $150,000 on renovations for a house she'd never own. I have $96 million she'll never touch, a son who finally learned the value of work, and a grandchild on the way who'll grow up in a house with wood paneling and Persian rugs and love that doesn't need updating. Melissa thought I was brain dead. Turns out, she was the one who was brain dead to loyalty, to love, to the possibility that coma patients can hear everything and remember everyone who celebrated their anticipated death while shopping for smart toilets. 3 weeks in a coma. 3 years of recovery. 12 years of her prison sentence. The math is beautiful. For every week she thought I was dying, she got 4 years to think about why I didn't. For every dollar she spent per minute, she got an hour in prison. That's a return on investment that even my portfolio can't match. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or complex plans. Sometimes it's just waking up at exactly the right moment, opening your eyes when someone is standing over your supposedly brain-dead body discussing paint colors, and saying, "Good morning, Melissa. Moroccan sand or Sahara sunset?" The look on her face was worth $150,847.33. Her prison sentence was priceless. And I'm still here in my authentically charming house with its criminal wood paneling, alive and aware and grateful for nurses named Maria, sons who can learn, and the ability to wake up when everyone thinks you won't. That's the real miracle, not surviving the stroke, but waking up at the perfect moment to catch a crime in progress. God's timing, Eleanor would have said. Or maybe she arranged it from wherever she is, making sure I open my eyes at exactly the right second to see Melissa destroy herself with her own greed. Either way, I'm awake, she's in prison, and the wood paneling stays. Thank you for listening to today's story of justice served ice cold. Look at your screen right now. Look at your screen now. There are 2 more videos. Both will restore your faith in karma. Hit the notification bell. Tomorrow's story will shock you even more. Remember, respect your elders, or become the next cautionary tale.